They called her the Forgotten Daughter. In a galaxy where royal blood was supposed to shine like starlight, Princess Lyria lived in the shadows. From the day she was born, her body betrayed her, paralyzed from the waist down. While her sisters sparred in the palace courtyards, laughed at grand feasts, and trained to rule, she sat quietly in her chair, watching life pass her by. She could read the pity in their eyes, and worse, the mockery whispered behind their fans. The paralyzed princess. A fragile doll, nothing more. A burden to the throne. Her father, the king, tried to shield her from cruelty, but the council was relentless. She cannot walk, she cannot fight, she cannot lead, they said. What kingdom would ever want her as their queen? Eventually, the council offered a solution that felt less like a marriage and more like exile. Marry her off to a human. To the great empires, humanity was little more than a curiosity, primitive, weak, still fumbling through the stars. Giving her to one of them was a way to get rid of her, a cruel joke disguised as diplomacy. And so, under glittering chandeliers and mocking eyes, Lyria's engagement was announced to Ethan, a human engineer. She expected pity. She expected disgust, perhaps even shame. But when Ethan walked forward, he did not look at her chair, nor at the council, nor at the jewels on her crown. He looked directly into her eyes, and when he bowed, it was not to the king, nor to the empire, it was to her. "You don't need to prove anything to me," he said softly. "You are already more than enough." In that moment, her heart trembled. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as broken, not as a burden, but as herself. Where others sneered, Ethan worked. The palace had long-forgotten workshops, filled with rusted machines and half-finished projects. It was there that he labored day and night, sparks dancing against cold metal, his hands blistered, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. He poured every ounce of his skill, every scrap of knowledge, into one creation. Lyria would often watch from the doorway, unsure whether to hope or to fear. And then, one dawn, he wheeled her into the chamber and whispered, "Close your eyes." When she opened them, she gasped. Before her stood a gleaming exosuit, slender, elegant, crafted not to cage her but to set her free. Ethan's hands shook as he helped her into it. Circuits hummed, energy coursed, and slowly, hesitantly, she rose. Her knees wavered, her muscles trembled, but she was standing. For the first time in her life, she looked down at her father's palace from her own height. She took one step, then another. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, I can walk." Ethan's smile was gentle, but his words fierce. "No, Lyria. You can soar." Their joy was short-lived. Within weeks, the sky itself darkened with war. A rival empire, vast and merciless, invaded. Their fleets blotted out suns, their weapons tore through defenses, panic gripped the palace. Ministers screamed in fear, generals hesitated, and nobles scrambled to save themselves. And once again, the cruel voices rose. What can she do? She was born broken, and a human husband? Worthless. But Ethan did not flinch. His voice cut through the fear. "You'll see." The battlefield burned like the surface of a dying star. Entire fleets shattered above, raining fire across the horizon. Soldiers screamed, ships fell, and the Empire's proud armies staggered under the might of the invaders. For every defender who rose, 2 were struck down. The air was thick with smoke, fire, and despair. And then, through the chaos, a figure emerged. At first it was just a silhouette, barely visible in the haze. Then the light caught her armor, a shining silver exosuit, its surface humming with alien energy and human ingenuity. The princess who had once been mocked as useless, as broken, now walked with steady, unflinching steps. Every stride seemed to silence the battlefield. "The paralyzed one?" a soldier whispered in disbelief. "Impossible." "She can't even walk," another gasped. Yet there she was, her visor lowered, circuits flared to life, weapons unfolded from her suit like the wings of a predator. For a single heartbeat, the battlefield held its breath. And then, her war cry tore through the silence. The enemy laughed at first, mocking her. "A cripple as your champion? This is the Empire's last hope?" But their laughter died the moment her plasma blades ignited, the light reflecting off her armor as she charged. She moved with precision that no one expected. Her first strike cut through the enemy's front line like paper. Her shield absorbed their fire, redirecting it back at them with devastating force. Where once she could not stand, now she stood unshakable, every step forward echoing across the battlefield like a drum of defiance. Hours passed like this. Wave after wave of enemy troops crashed against her, but she did not break. She fought with a fury born not from anger, but from years of humiliation, of whispers that she was worthless, of being cast aside as weak. Each blow of her blade was not just against the enemy. It was against every voice that ever said she could not rise. And always, in her ear, Ethan's calm voice guided her. "Steady, Lyria, a just left. One more step. You've got this. I'm here. I'll never let you fall." It was as if his strength flowed into her, his belief fueling her every strike. Alone, she might have collapsed, but together, they were unstoppable. The enemy's greatest weapon, a colossal war machine the size of a fortress, thundered forward. Its cannons glowed, promising destruction. The soldiers around her faltered, begging her to retreat. But Lyria only lifted her chin, eyes blazing behind her visor. "No," she said, her voice amplified across the comms. "We stand." With Ethan calibrating the suit's systems, she surged forward. Blasts of energy slammed against her shield, shaking her to her core, but she pushed on. Her blade carved into the machine's armor, sparks showering like falling stars. The giant staggered, roared, and then collapsed, flames consuming it as she delivered the final strike. The battlefield erupted in stunned silence. The enemy faltered. Soldiers who had seemed invincible moments ago now trembled, and then they broke. The fleet that had terrified empires for generations turned and fled, shattered by a princess they once would have pitied. When the dust cleared, the battlefield was silent. The defenders, once hopeless, now stared at her as if she were more than human, more than royal. She was a legend. Back in the Great Hall, the very nobles who once mocked her knelt so low their foreheads touched the floor. Generals who had doubted her swore oaths of loyalty. Ministers who had whispered burden now dared not meet her gaze. They begged to know where her strength had come from. Lyria removed her helmet, her face streaked with sweat and tears, but her eyes unshaken. She reached for Ethan's hand and raised it before the court. "My strength was never in my legs. It was never in weapons or crowns. Strength comes from being seen, from being believed in. When none of you saw me as more than broken, he did. He didn't see weakness. He saw my humanity." The hall fell silent. And then, applause, cheers, cries of devotion that shook the palace walls. Word spread beyond the Empire, racing through star systems faster than ships could fly. The paralyzed princess, who had been discarded as useless, was now the queen who stood against an empire and won. And beside her, always, was the human who had never once looked at her as broken, only as whole.